You didn't even notice that my background's different.
Oh, it is.
I
My
have,
eyeball,
well,
because you must have turned like this angle, right?
I'm
No?
in a whole different room.
Oh, because your curtain looks familiar. Or you just like full you like that look, so you have it.
What look? Floral?
No, the
Oh,
the
okay.
leaves.
Oh, yeah, I do. My sister Elizabeth gave these to me.
They're
She's very
pretty.
much into minimizing and purging, so she gives me random stuff all the time. Um, okay, so this is, oh no, so I'm in a totally different room because where I was before is where the Christmas tree goes. So
Ah,
we had to like have to rearrange every year.
switcheroo.
So yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It's nice though. It's a different perspective.
It is nice. I
Always
like your
good.
painting.
Oh yeah. Oh, and then there's my Buddha. My Buddha's over here. Should I do it? There's my
Oh, that's
Buddha.
beautiful. Yeah.
Love that thing.
Neat.
And my
Yeah.
poinsettia from my mom, of course.
Yeah.
So yeah, so when the Christmas tree comes around, I gotta like, yeah, paint it on. But everybody should have it that every once in a while, you should change your angle.
Change it up. Oh, I like
Give it
that.
your
Change
life
your angle. It's
every once in a
literal
while.
and figurative. Yes.
It is. And now I have this big window right here, and I'm sure Lulu will be visiting me often during this episode. So this is episode 32. And Katie's gonna talk about a topic that she that what because I said to you, I'm like, pick a topic.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um, but I wanted to mention one article that I read.
Okay.
And personally, when I saw the headline, I was like, right on. And the kids were like, what happened? Australia banning social media for kids under the age of 16.
Oh, really?
Hmm?
Like,
And
I mean, how do they even reinforce that though?
so the article said it was, I think it was in USA Today, but now it's been all over the place, right? Um, but obviously there's going to be some logistics, right, that they're going to have to figure out. But I think it's great. I do. Like
Yep.
you know that I teach public speaking and I teach writing studies, which
Mhm.
writing studies is the old freshman comp. Now we call it writing studies. And I give my students complete like freedom to pick their own topics
Okay.
for their speeches and for their final papers. I do not assign them. I have always felt that when you assign them or you only give them a list to choose from, then there's no motivation there. They're not interested. So I let them pick their own topics. You would not believe how many college students choose the negative effects of social media as their topic.
Especially that age, because they would know.
Tons of them,
Yeah.
from body image to anxiety to, cyberbullying to like, so Australia going to ban social media for kids under the age of 16. And I think it's
Wow.
about time. I do. I think it's
Yeah.
about time.
That's a real ballsy
Um,
move. Good for
it
them.
is. And I think it's awesome.
Yeah.
So that was my ripped from the headlines for this week. But I think we're going to hear more about it. And I think you're going
Yeah.
to hear more countries wanting to try. I mean, I say it all the time, like cell phones have changed us for permanently and not necessarily for the better.
Yep.
I have said that like time and
Oh,
time
I'd
again.
see it. Being in mental health as long as I have, pre-social media and seeing what the kids come to with now and what the issues are as opposed to what they were then. It's so obvious. Yeah.
Amazing. It's
Yeah.
amazing. So I think that's a really awesome move. Like I said, logistically speaking, I don't know how you enforce it, you know. But they'll, hey, where there's a will, there's a way, as far as I'm concerned. Anything's possible. So you wanted to talk about
Yeah. So, as we talk about, one of our underlying ongoing themes is, narcissistic personality disorder, but we've also talked about, um, all the different types of personality disorders. And I think that, I've broken down, you've got the two different components, right? You've got classic mental illness, which is either environmental or organic. It can come both ways, and you can have both too. Kind of like having, say, an autoimmune disease that flares up every once in a while. You might have depression that's in remission, and then something comes in, high levels of stress or whatever, kicks it into gear, right?
Right.
Um, and that, so those guys are, depression, anxiety, any psychotic, mental illness, things of that nature. And then on the flip side, you have things called personality disorders, which are attributed to bad learned behavior, which is, you're not really born with this stuff, right? I mean, you come into this world with, some bonus stuff, some deficit stuff, and then there's stuff you learn that either serves you well or not so much. And
Mhm.
personality disorders are those things. So they often stem from traumatic dynamics that you grew up with, or they affected, and what I really want to point out, affected the development of the brain, right? So
Okay.
personality disorders are kind of different ways that the brain didn't develop quite, I don't want to say normally, but traditionally, right?
And that comes from some sort of traumatic event
Well, it
or
comes from, and it doesn't even
environment?
have to be trauma, Ellen. It can just be, let me use a different example. If you grew up, think of cultural dynamics, right? You grew up in a house where you celebrate Chrismica, right? So you have like Christmas and Hanukkah, and that's what you grew up with. That's what you know.
Yeah.
So
Christmas. How do you say it?
Chrismica,
Christmas. Okay. I
yeah,
like that.
yeah. So you celebrate both. So then you grow up with that, and then you go into an environment where they don't do that, and you're like, oh, I'm gonna have to switch my brain, to my new partner or my new friend or my new social group. And I'm going to have to adapt to that, right? So that's not
Mhm.
necessarily a trauma, it's just a different reality, right?
Okay. Okay. Do you, and just side note,
Yeah.
so say you did grow up that way and then you enter into a environment where that was not how everybody else grew up. Do some people go to like, what's the word I'm looking for? Are they like, wow, is that wrong? Wow, is my family weird? Wow, is that like people also can sometimes think that too, right? Like,
Oh my
oh,
gosh, yeah. So they
we
go,
weren't the convention, right? We weren't the societal convention.
yeah,
We
and then
did
you
things
have to
differently.
decide. The hardest part is, okay, was that wrong? Okay, so let's take the idea of wrong and right out of it. So let's just take, does it work for me? So, and when I take the me and put me into the world, will my me work with the world? Right?
Well, and it's so funny you say that because you know how when you get older and you start to think about like what you thought were personally held beliefs, and then you realize they just kind of seeped into you from your parents, and you're
Yep.
like, I really kind of don't believe that, like I really
Yep.
kind of don't. And it's funny because like my mom, who I've mentioned before, is very much creature of habit, very much concerned with what other people think,
Yep.
like, and so the one day, because like this is my last like holiday season in this house because I'm moving in 2025. That was always my goal.
Okay.
And once my youngest turned 18, right, I was going to sell this house. I'm out here. Well, I'm not far, everyone, not far. But so I said to her, because I was thinking to myself, you know what? Maybe I won't get a tree this year for Christmas because like you get a live tree. And plus, I've been struggling lately with the live tree, cutting it down and throwing it to the curb and that being it.
Yeah,
Like
I've
it
been having
started to
issues
like,
with that too. I hear you.
you
Yeah.
know,
Mhm.
so well, that's a whole other other topic.
I
But so
used to
I
love
say,
fishing too, and I'm getting older and I like can't fish, it's
like,
getting hard
I
to do.
just, eh.
I
And
know.
so then you're
Anyway,
like,
I digress.
anyway.
Yes.
So I
So your
said to
mom,
her,
your
I
mom
say to
was,
my
what did she
she,
say?
she was over the one day and I was like, and she said something. And I said, yeah, I don't think I'm gonna get a tree this year. She's like, you can't do that. I was like, whoa, like super violent reaction. She's like, you can't do that. You can't do that. You have to get a tree. You have to. I'm like, who is telling
Mhm.
me that I have to get a Christmas tree this year? Like, who are these people that, like that? Because that's what you have to. You have to.
It's the Christmas
You
tree
have to.
police,
I'm like,
Ellen.
who? Who are these people? Who are these people that we're always talking about? Who are these people that are gonna have all these thoughts about me? You know, and but she's
Yeah.
and I realized as I get older, and it was some of the things that were ingrained in me from mostly her, because my dad could roll with anything.
Yeah.
And you start to realize, like, well, that's not really how the world works. And it is okay for me not to get a Christmas tree. You know, no one's gonna think I'm, anti-Christmas. I love Christmas. But like it was that's how like societal constructs for her.
Yeah.
Well, they make her very comfortable, right? Like this is how it is.
Yeah.
Period. Like when
Yeah.
I told her I'm moving next year,
Oh, I can't.
the response, what about me?
Oh, yeah.
I was like, I said, well, it's not about you. My usual response. And she was like, what am I supposed to do? I was like, same thing you've been doing for the last 85 years. I don't know. Like, to her, it's just, she just can't fathom,
Yeah.
right? She just can't fathom. So that just came to me. So, okay. So
Yeah.
Christmaka.
Chris McCullough, right. So
Okay.
just an example. Now, did I ever talk about, and it's good to talk about cultural norms, and here's an example of something that someone had. Oh, we should note that it's like really cold in Western New York, and it's not like Ellen and I were like, hey, let's wear our hats. And
We do have our heat on in our house. It's
yeah,
just,
we do have heats on. It's just
it's
still really cold.
crazy. Yeah. Plus, I just got this hat, so I was gonna wear it either way. Just
It's
picked up
nice. I'm a little
my
embarrassed. I
Amherst
don't know
merch.
what the A means. It's a
It's
sport.
for Amherst High School.
Ah, okay. All right. All
Yeah,
right.
from their apparel sale.
Yeah, mine's just
Um,
got a light on it.
I like it.
Oop, I think it blinks. It does,
Oh my God, you are too much.
It's
You
really
are too
helpful
much.
when I'm doing like because I can't see anymore. Anyway, okay.
Anyway,
So did I ever talk about the young woman who went to college and she had a routine that was in her family that was really bizarre that it never occurred to her that not everybody did it, and it was to keep monsters away from under the bed?
no.
Okay. So here's an example. If you have a behavior that is
This is gonna be good.
learned
Right.
that you take with you into the world and you're like, oh, wait a second, this is not working, right? Okay. So young woman, client of mine, actually, she wasn't my client. My client was the one who was roommates with her.
Oh,
So
oh,
they
oh,
were
okay.
college roommates and we were talking about, it doesn't matter. But anyway, she says, so she had this college roommate, really liked her,
Right.
and they were dorming together in the dorms. But every night before she went to bed, and I kind of gave the story away, but
No,
she
no.
put a Pop-Tart on a paper plate under the bed. Now, she didn't notice it right at first, my client, but then she did notice because she'd have this routine. She'd go whatever to the bathroom, come back, Pop-Tart, paper plate under the bed. So, and other than that, this young woman was pretty just, cool, real fun to hang out with. But it was kind of strange, and my client didn't know how to address it. And my client had some real OCD issues. She was worried about bugs and vermin and stuff. And so that's why it came up,
Yeah. Especially in
because
a
she was just
dorm.
like, anyway, we worked a lot about how to approach this woman about the Pop-Tart under the bed thing. And basically, my client sat down, had a conversation with her and just said, I gotta ask you something. Love living with you. I've got one thing and it's really pushing my buttons and it's triggering me because of my bug thing and stuff. Do you need to, or why do you put a Pop-Tart under your bed every night? So basically what it came down to is her friend growing up was terrified, had anxiety, and, just was real terrified of the critter under the bed, the monster under the bed. And so she and her mom had come up with this belief system that, well, monsters only come out when they're hungry. So if you put a Pop-Tart under the bed, you'll feed them. And even if it's not gone, just that the monsters knowing that it's there, they won't come out from under the bed. So this young woman just had this routine her whole life. Had become so embedded in her reality that it did not even occur to her that this was not something people did.
Now, she had gotten to college at this point.
Mhm.
did it strike her anywhere along the line that the Pop-Tart was never gone in the morning? So
You know, I
perhaps,
don't know all the details, but the thing was, it was almost, I guess the idea was, you know, even if he doesn't eat it, and I don't know, maybe the mom ate it at some point, or I don't know, but the fact was you kept the monster appeased, and that, you know, whether he ate it or not, he wasn't coming out because he had food right there available to him.
was it the same Pop-Tart every night? Because if it was a new Pop-Tart every night, that's a
I don't know.
fortune in fucking
Did she
Pop-Tarts
take the
over again.
Pop-Tart in the morning and put it in the toaster? And I have no idea. I don't know.
And then if the mom would have been like, well, I'll eat this one, well, then that just would have fucking confirmed that they're monsters. I mean, that like would have backfired. But that gave, okay, so her doing that every night gave her a level of comfort, eased her fears
Right.
about
However, when
monsters.
she brought that belief system about the world into her new life,
Mhm.
it did not work, right? So she had that forced her to find now I in my clinical mind, I assumed, you know, when maybe she wasn't doing it every night anymore or something, but her anxiety probably about new things. She was in a college environment.
Right,
Maybe
right.
she just resorted back to stuff she knew, whatever. But you know, she realized that, oh, this is not going to work. Therefore, I'm going to have to seek different ways to get my needs met, right? That is a healthy brain adapting to, I don't want to call, you know, Pop-Tart therapy maladaptive, but let's just say that. So, you know, that is a
It's
healthy
going on the
brain.
merch. Pop-Tart under the bed's going on the merch.
So,
There's
so
another one. Melons and Pop-Tarts.
that's right. It's evidence-based. You can only use certain, but the fact is that maladaptive coping skill realized it didn't fit into her world anymore. So what did she do? Seek different ways to ease her mind and get her needs met. And she did just fine. I mean, as far as I know, she wasn't my client, but they did resolve it and they're, you know, they remained very good friends. And the realization for this young woman when it was a gift when my client confronted her on it, had a conversation because she was like, oh crap, I think one of the moments is that sometimes you don't know you're doing it, right? And
Yeah.
in those key moments when someone gently points it out to you, you're going to do one of two things. You're either going to resist it
Hmm.
or you're going to seek different ways and recognize that maybe it's not the best way to approach things, right?
It is so interesting because there's so many things that families do that
Culturally, yeah.
and this brings in, really, like I say to my kids all the time, there's no weird and there's no normal, right?
Yeah.
Like there really isn't.
Mhm.
Because it is what it is. And I guess you get more comfortable with that as you get older, right? Like
Mhm.
you kind of you start to have like this radical self-acceptance, right? You're like, this is
Yeah.
just who I am, but yeah, I mean, little traditions that families have, and then when the kids go out in the world
Yeah. How do
and
they fit? Yeah.
and other people
And
are
which
like,
ones
what are
do
you
you
doing?
want to infuse and stand up for? You know, even your children, you know, they have, you know, I'm sure your kids, my kids, they had rituals, you know, that we did that, you know, Liz and I would think, this one's probably not going to fit in the world very well. So we might
We
need
should
to
stop.
help.
We should
Yeah,
stop
this
doing
one's not gonna, so this one we might need to help them kind of weed out over time, or this one's a great one, they can teach it to their own kids, or whatever it is. Um, but, and then you get older too, and sometimes you go back to those things, you're like, screw it, I don't care if it's weird, it works,
exactly
nobody's
right.
getting hurt, and, you
Exactly
know,
right.
yeah, it doesn't
I
matter.
think a very classic example is like when my kids have their friends over,
Yeah,
and I can tell which kids are raised in a no-shoe household and which kids are raised in what,
oh
like that
yeah,
is,
yeah,
they walk in and it is like just they take their shoes off because I'm not a no shoe. I don't care. Like
yeah,
I'm whatever.
yeah,
But I know the ones that were raised in the leave the shoes at the door household because it
yeah.
is like just instinctual. They just walk in, take
And
them
you know,
off, and
that's
walk out.
interesting too, because growing up, not growing up here, and when I moved here when I was little, I didn't, it just doesn't happen in California. I don't know if because there's not the same kind of weather. I mean,
That's kind of why, yeah.
yeah, but I would think it's germ oriented too. I don't know. But then my kids do it natural. I don't know, but I'm not either. But then sometimes I think about it, I'm like, shoes are gross.
People are gross. I
People are
mean,
gross.
like, honestly, it's not just shoes. Money is disgustingly
It's just
dirty.
disgusting.
Like, just, but you can't think about it too hard, or else you don't leave your house.
I know.
Okay, so,
So that
so
being said,
that,
so this is
okay,
the
that's the
long
third.
version. What I'm trying to do is we have learned behavior, we have organic behavior, or things that we do that we're just, nature nurture, right?
Right, right.
And what's interesting is you can have all your brain intact and you can do stuff and you have certain personality quirks that you've worked out that actually work in your world, some don't. You're open to the concept of, oh, that one doesn't work, teach me new things. And then let's say one day, let's get you past brain development age. So you gotta be 25, 26. Say you're 30.
Okay.
Okay. Now, this also can happen at a young age too, which affects the way the brain is developed. But let's go super dramatic. Okay, so let's say
Okay,
your brain's already developed. Let's say you're 26 years old, you had the same personality the whole time. All of a sudden you fall off a ladder from 12 feet and you hit your head and you're unconscious, you're in the hospital, and you wake up with a traumatic brain injury.
okay.
Okay. So it's not even, you're not in a coma. You're not necessarily, you have a concussion, maybe there's visible marks, whatever. They can verify that there's been some disruption in the part of your brain that looks at, so let's say frontal lobe, the part
Yeah,
that's
let me,
looking
can
at.
I ask you a question for our viewers?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
There is concussion and there is TBI.
Oh, yeah.
What 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 would make like a medical staff, after an injury say this is a TBI?
Okay, so I'm
What
not a
are the
medical doctor,
factors?
but my knowledge of that
Mhm.
is you have a concussion, your brain swells a little bit, right? You have some post-concussion syndromes, which might be dizziness, things like that. However, a TBI shows up on an MRI. So,
Okay,
it's a little fissure or something that your brain actually got injured,
okay,
where your concussion, there was swelling of the brain, but there wasn't necessarily injury to the brain that's visible anyway. You might have still had one. Maybe it's deep inside the brain, but they can't see it.
okay. Because I figured there was a difference. I mean,
Yeah, that's my
because
understanding. Yeah.
I didn't hear the term TBI until like we were over in Iraq and Afghanistan.
Yeah.
And you started hearing the soldiers' TBIs from the roadside bombing.
Oh, yeah.
Because my my one nephew was a Marine and he was in Afghanistan and Iraq. And he had a TBI from a roadside bombing
Yeah.
and he had to relearn how to walk and speak.
Yeah.
And they rehabilitated him over there.
Yeah. So that was
His
probably,
parents
and I'm
never
not that
knew.
good with my
Yeah.
neuroscience in the brain, but
Mhm.
that wouldn't be front. So he had an injury someplace else. So frontal lobe is reasoning, language, all that kind of
Okay.
stuff. So
Okay.
it must have hit the back of his brain or something where that's functionality, movement and stuff. Oh, how did he do?
He's great. He's
Okay.
great. I mean, he served his time in the Marines. He came home. Um, like nobody knew about the TBI until after he was done with service. His parents didn't even know.
Wow. Okay.
Because what were they gonna do? I mean, what were they gonna do? They live in Colorado, like so no, he's been back for years. He's 37. I don't know, I get them all
Yeah,
confused.
that sounds
But
about right.
yeah, so yeah, but it was traumatic, like having to relearn how
Yeah.
to do
Yeah.
things. But I
So if
think
you
that
take that
obviously,
down,
yeah,
here's the thing about TBIs, right? Because we traumatic brain injuries, and then we gave it an acronym like we do with everything else. But the fact that you can get an injury on your brain, and even one for your nephew, that wouldn't have to be that big, believe it or not. So in our brains, like we think it registers for us. We're like, oh, you have an injury on your brain, it's going to affect you physically. And that's actually one of the more devastating symptoms of a traumatic brain injury. What we miss and have for eons is people can have concussions, have a tiny little TBI that maybe wasn't even picked up on. Maybe they hit their head and never went to the hospital, you know, whatever like that. And now you see behavior changes. Now, logically, you know, 2024, we think about, oh, that makes sense. I guess if it can affect you physically, it could affect you mentally and emotionally too, right?
Sure.
Yeah. So what they now are recognizing is that personalities can change after you have a traumatic brain injury. You can have a dramatic, some have dramatic personality changes. And interestingly enough, it more often than not, it becomes negative behaviors that begin to emerge after a TBI. Not all of a sudden you have a TBI and now you're all lovey-dovey.
Okay. I'm glad you said that like that, because was it you and I who spoke about the man? Maybe it was, maybe it wasn't. A man who suffered, a brain injury for like, around the house, a fall, whatever. It
Yeah.
was not dramatic, Um, and after he suffered it, and he did have, obviously a TBI, he was married, had kids. He couldn't show emotion anymore.
Yeah.
He was like,
He's gone.
it wasn't that he still wasn't like active and smart and whatever. He just had no, like, no, he couldn't express love. He didn't feel it.
He
It
couldn't
ended
tap
up,
into it.
it
Yeah.
ended up like ending his marriage because his wife was like, I can't be married to somebody who can't show me any affection, who doesn't feel any like love for me, because couldn't. He just couldn't. He couldn't do it.
Yeah,
It was
which
gone.
makes me, you know, which can even go into folks with different developmental disorders, you know, the folks with developmental disorders that say with Down syndrome and thing. And one of the things that we always talk about is often their lack of boundaries, their lack of the off switch, which is because their frontal lobe isn't completely developed. That's why they're more like children, right?
Right. Right.
Even as
Right.
adults. Now, I should have done my research a little better, but I love neuroscience, and that's a lot of what we're talking about. But I'm trying to
Right.
think of the part of the brain that is it the amygdala that controls emotion? I can't remember. But that would
All I
be
remember is medulla oblongata. Is that one of them? Did I
well,
say it
so
right?
the part of the brain, obviously with that guy, the part of the brain that had a disruption was the part that shows emotion.
Yeah. Isn't that just, and what's so interesting about that
Yeah.
when talking about stuff like this, if you do not have the ability to feel emotion, nothing bothers you,
Right. So, and that
right?
gets us, so I'm looking up the part of the brain that, because it's making me crazy now. Oh, it's the limbic system.
Okay.
I am right. I can't say it, but
Amygdala,
the
amygdala,
amygdala. Nope. The
amygdala,
no,
amygdalata,
the sons of bitch.
amygdala. Now I'm just making shit up. The
Yeah,
brain.
that's
Okay,
no, I
there's
like
part of the
it.
brain that controls emotion.
Basically, it's the temporal lobe, which is
Okay.
deeper inside the
Hmm.
amygdala. It's deeper inside. It's over in here. This is the most susceptible, obviously, because it's right there, like boink,
Right, right, right,
So
right.
that's why. Let's see. I'm trying to think. Oh, so the deep cerebellum, which is what your nephew would have had damage, which makes sense. It was back here. So if he went like this, when there was that impact, that would make sense because it would be here where he would lose his balance, coordination, and his inability to move his body. Yeah. So we have certain parts of our brain that are more vulnerable because they're not as embedded in there, right? So, but what you're saying, so let's look at that guy. So he couldn't show emotion anymore, right?
Couldn't feel it.
Therefore, so he doesn't have, okay, so let me throw this at you. So you have a brain injury, even if it's just a little one. All of a sudden you can't feel emotion,
Right.
right? And so you don't have any guilt. You don't have any remorse. You don't have any sense of the things that make you want to do right or wrong. What is that starting to sound like?
Sociopath,
Yeah.
narcissist.
You got it. So if you go through the history of some of our most famous serial killers, um, it's ridiculous now. I think they're up to like 75% of them had some sort of injury in their brain, some when they were older, some when they were younger, and you can even, and that's like you can have a brain injury. So say like you're just you, then you have a brain injury, like the gentleman you were talking about, then you totally change. But what it makes it even more complicated is if you have a brain injury when you're a child, when your brain isn't completely developed,
Mm.
you can't go back to where your brain was completely developed. You don't know any different. You know what I
Right.
mean?
Right. It's
That's your
it's just
norm.
how
It's how
you've
you've
always
always
been.
been.
You know what's
So,
funny? Here, this is kind of funny. There was a lady that I was friends with at
mhm.
like years ago. And she's a good person, you know, whatever. But the one thing I noticed about her is she had no highs and lows. Do you know what I mean?
Mm,
Like nothing ever really like bad news didn't flatten her.
yep.
Good news didn't make her like,
Mm,
joyous, right?
mhm, mhm.
And it wasn't like she was a flat line. It wasn't like that, but it was just no,
The spectrum was squished. The spectrum
yeah,
of
like no
emotion. Yeah.
real fluctuation in
Yep.
in feeling, I guess. And I mentioned it once, not to her, to another friend in our group. And she was like, "Whoa," she's like, "Well, when she was 7, she fell off her bike and had a skull fracture and was in like a medically induced coma
Yeah.
for like a couple of days."
Yeah.
And I was like, that's got to have something to do with it.
Yeah. And so your temporal lobe, that would have been that as well. Yeah,
Got
absolutely.
to
A
have
skull
something to do with
fracture?
it.
Sure.
Yeah. And so, and this is, so if she was like 6 or 7 when it happened, that's 45, 48 years ago,
Yeah.
right? They weren't, they weren't doing stuff like we are now you know, with that type of injury. They're
Yeah.
just like, oh, skull fracture, medically induced coma, take her out. She good? Yeah. Okay.
Yep.
Like it wasn't any, they were worried about the physical, right? They
Absolutely.
they they
Yeah.
weren't worried about the
All we know is,
emotional and
brain, head bleeds are super intense. You got to stop the bleeding. And they're looking to see if your brain is bleeding. That's basically it.
right. So I mean, when this other lady told me that, I was like, that's got to be it. I
Yeah.
mean, because it's just she's just so not affected, I
Yeah.
guess is the word that, and it's not like she didn't laugh or, you know what I mean? Like, or she wasn't funny or but it was so subdued compared to, reactions of other people. It was, I just noticed it, I guess is the
Yeah.
best way to put it. But, I'm someone, I wouldn't say that I'm like over emotional, right? But I react,
Yeah.
and, but, and so I don't know, I just noticed it.
I
And then
always
when I
think
brought
of it,
that up,
and often when I meet people, as clients, I, ask them where their volume is set at, how high does their volume go? And for some people are like, I'm a steady 6, and then some people are like, I can go to 11, I can go, whatever it is. But, and I still think we have a lot to learn with that. I mean, the DSM took away, so the stuff we're talking about was called
mhm,
access to disorders. And
okay,
then the stuff that you're born with is the access one. Now they took away the axes, which, I have mixed feelings about, but I also understand is what they're trying to do is stop this differentiation between what happened organically and then what happened behaviorally and entertain the idea that maybe both can be both, you know
okay, okay,
because
interesting.
we are looking at MRIs, neuroscientists are looking at MRIs of people. Maybe I'll pull those up, those are really cool pictures, of people in an depressive episode and what their brain
Mm,
looks like. So is it about that the brain's there, but the activity isn't firing, right? That's what we look at when it comes to depression, right? So if we look at that, you have an intact brain, but the neurons aren't firing right,
mm,
as opposed to, an injury, which maybe not only neurons aren't firing right, but there's something that got busted there, so
see, and it to me, as they always say, like space is the final frontier. I think the mind is the final frontier.
oh
Like, I
yeah.
think the mind, honestly, I could give a shit about space. Okay. Like, I really could. Um,
Mhm.
and just what did I read something the other day about like how we want to keep the program going where we bring rocks back from Mars. Gives a shit. I mean, honestly, I think it's more important to focus on things like the human brain. I don't think we know half of what
No,
it's capable of,
no.
or what it controls, or what we know some, right?
That
We
and
know
the
some.
endocrine system, how all of our hormones and all that stuff works. I don't, you see an endocrine, I don't think we know it.
I don't think we know shit.
I
I
don't,
mean, like,
you
yeah,
know.
my mother always says, medicine is not an exact science, right?
Mhm.
Case in point. I mean, this is kind of like how we grew up, right? Eggs are bad for you. Eggs are good for you. Eggs are bad for you again. I mean, like, and we'd be like,
Yeah, you're right.
okay,
You're
what's
right.
the answer? Are
Is
they good or
it?
bad?
And
Like,
now all of a
what?
sudden there's good cholesterol, there's bad cholesterol, there's
That's
bad
wrong.
fats, there's good fats. I'm like, who's writing these rules?
I know. And then I saw my friend Mary Lou, Mary Lou, she was reading a book about the blue zones, right? The blue zones of the world where people live the longest. And
Okay,
there's like 5 or 6 of them.
okay,
There is one in the United States. It's in California. It's like
okay.
a certain like
I
town
don't
or
know
beach.
anything about blue zones.
Blue zones. This is where people live to older ages, and
Okay.
they've narrowed it down as to what these people do that allows them to like live longer, or why they live longer. And it's like Mediterranean based diet, right?
Okay. Right.
um Moderate drinking, woot woot, moderate drinking. But I mean, Katie, like, exercise, having a community, having friends. Well, no shit. I mean, like, come
So
on.
when you say blue zones, it's not necessarily something in the environment, it's just a group of people doing certain
They
things.
they call them blue zones.
Huh.
That's what they call them. There's like 5 or 6 of them in the world.
Wait
And
a
obviously,
second. Can't you just get a bunch of people to do that and then now you have a blue zone?
yeah. Well, now
Okay.
they put a book out about it. There's going to be more blue zones. But
All right.
they said, like, their longevity, that only 20 to 30% of it is genetics, right? They're like just 20 to 30%. I'm like, where are you getting these numbers from? Like,
Yeah.
seriously, like, where are you getting these numbers from? I think genetics can be attributed to a lot.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I do. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I think, like, people look at my mom. Like, we were down at my nephew's wedding, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we were at the rehearsal dinner. My mom was up at the bar, of course, getting herself a glass of wine. And I walked up behind her and I said to the bartender, I was like, she's had enough. And she was like, Ellen. And I was like, sorry, mom. And the bartender was like, oh, said to my mom, like, you look great or whatever. And I said, she's 85. And she goes, what? And I said, she's 85. And the bartender was like, what's your secret? My mom was like, well, first of all, this. And I was like, but you know what? There's something to be said. I don't know if research has been done on this or what, but like, my mom's part German, right? I just feel like German people are hardy people. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? There's something to be said for like genetics of ethnicity. Does that make
Yeah.
sense? Like, I
Yeah.
mean, you know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
like Russian people are tough
Yeah.
people, mainly because of the climate they live in,
Yeah.
right? I
Yeah.
mean, but it almost
Well, why would
there's
it be?
so much to it. There's so much
Look
to
at the different kinds of bears, right? Genetically, they're wired the same, but you
it. I love
pop
the way
one
you
in
bring
the
up random
Arctic and
stuff.
they're both what?
I love
Oh yeah.
bears.
But look at how certain types of animals adapt based on their environment. That would be genetics, right?
Yeah, I fully agree. And like us living, here, right, in
Yeah.
Buffalo. Um, and clearly I'm looking at my window at a shit ton of snow, and I'm
Yeah.
sure you are too.
Mhm.
But like, I feel like it kind of like breeds something in you, right? Because it's
Mhm.
some people would consider our weather like a hardship, right?
Mhm.
Like if they
Mhm.
weren't from here. We've adapted to it. Like it makes us like, I think it gives you like a hardiness.
Oh my
Like
gosh, so I'm going to take it even to a bigger scale. Maybe the concept and forced adaptability is what makes you hardier. Any
I,
con any
I think
forced
so.
adaptability where you have to, if you're in a perfect little environment where you don't have to adapt to anything, how
Like
do you
San
think
Diego.
you're what are we going to do and pluck you someplace else? How are you going to do?
How are you
Someone
gonna
like us, with us in this, you pluck us into a different environment with multiple weather dynamics, we're going to be okay.
yeah, like I'll just say this, then we can move on. But I saw a meme once, and
Yeah,
it was like there was like a ton of snow on the ground, right? Like, and it was snowing, and there was like five girls like dressed to go out, like in
yeah.
like dresses and heels, no coats, no nothing. And at the bottom of the meme, it said, "Buffalo women are just built differently." It's true. I remember growing up, going out, no coat, no hat. It was 11 degrees outside. We're like, yeah, we're going downtown. Okay, let's go. I mean, you're just like, yeah, let's go. Everybody else would
Yeah,
be like, there's no way I'm going outside right now.
yeah.
Nope, not us. We're like, I'm there. So
Yeah. I
I
mean,
think
there's a
that there's something to that.
resiliency to your environment. There's a resiliency that develops as a result of emotional. So anything that's given you a little bit of hardship that you've had to kind of buck up and adapt, that's going to make you more durable in other situations, right? You
I
know,
do believe that.
that's the whole concept of let your kids get skin knees, all the helicoptering parent stuff that's not going to benefit them. Um,
That just made me. Did you, did you ever see the South Park where the parents let the kids get chicken pox because they want them to get it and get it over with? And the kids find out, so they give their parents herpes. They they steal the toothbrush from the one prostitute in town.
Oh my God. Maybe not that extreme, but yes, I know. It's just talking
Like honestly, one of the funniest things
about-
is they were like, they made us get chicken. But that's kind of what we're talking about. Because if you don't have it as a child and you get it as an adult, it's horrible.
It
Like
is.
it's like
Well,
serious.
but that's
So
like
you're
another, that's like, then they tell you you're okay, and then what? Then there's shingles.
oh,
What's that
uh,
commercial? Shingles
so
doesn't care. That's so terrible. I'm
oh my
happy.
god,
I'm
we're
watching
not
my A1C and getting regular exercise. It's like shingles doesn't care.
that's
Boy, they
that's a
make it
pretty
terrifying to be
that's a
middle-aged.
brutal message. Oh my god,
It's
okay.
like TBIs don't care. I was so nice. No.
But I'm a good person. No one gives a fuck. Oh shit. Okay, so you said that there's a link, as you've kind of already established.
Right.
A
So what
link.
basically all of that says is you can be one way, physically oriented, all of that, emotionally intact. Something happens to your brain and it can change things. So let me look at, so one of the research statistics, which I think is interesting in relation to what we're talking about. So now that I've given the background again about the personality disorders and all of that. So the an article that was published, it was back in 2000, I think, through the National Library of Medicine, which I think it was published. I probably saw it in the National Institute, NIM is
Right.
probably where I saw it. So basically, it says that they took a bunch of people that had borderline personality, avoidant personality, paranoid, and narcissistic personality. Okay. And they took a sample of all those folks, and out of the folks that they spoke to and interacted with, 66% of them had had a TBI.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah. So that's a lot, that's a lot.
That is a lot.
And so, the conclusion, and it's a very involved article, but it basically says, more than half of people who are diagnosed with those specific personality disorders, which are some of the most predominant that show up in kind of treatment environments, had some sort of mishap in their brain,
Really?
So now the question is, which I always love, is when you're growing up, right? And you either have an injury, okay, this is kind of abstract, but let me see if I can get it. Do all injuries to the brain have to be physical? That's my thought. So can there be traumatic brain injuries that didn't happen because of a hit, but because of trauma in the environment? And the answer to that is yes. So
Okay.
if you do some research now, I think we talked a little bit, there's an assessment called the ACEs, which is Adverse Childhood Experiences. So basically,
Yeah.
so it's measuring, so as your brain develops, and if you are impacted consistently with traumatic emotional stuff, this is kind of how we started it. And again, it's not like you lost a football game or so. It's not like that. They have a very regimented list of the things that affect brain development in regard to being exposed to it, as a child. So you can affect the development of your brain. Growing up can be affected by non-physical traumatic injuries, just like your brain you can get a TBI from a physical injury, which affects you as well. Now, they don't call, a traumatic brain development process a TBI. Frankly, I think they should all be called TBIs, because whether it was part of the way your brain developed because of a physical injury or an emotional injury, it still results in the same thing.
Yes. I would, yeah, I would think it would. If as a child you're subjected to persistent emotional abuse.
Yep.
Yes, that would
It has
affect
the same
your brain.
impact as whacking your head up when you fall down off a ladder. It has the same. Now, the difference is it happens over, death by 1,000 cuts. It happens over a period of time, as opposed to a physical injury, which is boom, and now you're a different person. If you're developing. So let's take that, and our brain is malleable. We know this because if you have something that isn't working, you can go to therapy and do cognitive behavioral therapy, which is basically fake it till you make it, and rework your brain to get it to a healthy place. Well, wouldn't it apply to the reverse as well, right? So if, like cults, for example, you take a well-adapted brain, you pop it into an environment where the same thing is happening over and over again, just like muscle memory, you can build muscles, your muscles can atrophy, your brain can change. We are an amazing being like that. Now let's take a person like yourself, plop you into a marriage that was abusive, chronic, and it was death by 1,000 cuts. You adapted, you interacted, it changed your brain, Ellen. And so then you have spent all these years afterward working. That's why you got to go therapy. It's why you got to do all those things, because people are like, how did I do that? Why did I do that? That's why I always say, if you were the person you were the day you met him, and you met him the way he was 20 years later, you would have never, your brain grew around that damaged thing to adapt. That's what we do.
And that I have said before, I think I was talking to my mom, probably, most likely. And I said to her, and this was not that long ago, I said, he is the worst thing that ever happened to me. He is the worst thing that ever happened to me. people say to me, friends of mine and stuff like, oh, you're so strong, blah, blah, blah. Like that people tell me I'm intimidating, and I'm like, no, I'm not. No, I'm not. What I am is, I was, when I was 20, 21, before I met him, I was a confident person.
Mhm.
I was confident. I liked myself. Um, I was actually, before the days of all the buzzwords and everything like that, I was a pretty mentally and emotionally healthy female.
Mhm.
Um, and yeah, obviously I had like some stuff, that I didn't realize till later on, like with my childhood and stuff like
Sure,
that.
sure.
Nothing bad, but everybody's got something.
How your
Um,
brain develops, good, bad, whatever, it's affected by consistency in your environment, right?
right. And 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 then I met him when I was like 21 and I married and I was 26.
Yeah,
And those are formative years.
big time.
And
So not only were you, your brain was wrapping around that dynamic, it wasn't even, this wasn't even completely developed yet. So yeah,
no, it wasn't. And I look back on like who I was then. Um, I look back on that and on the 21-year-old Ellen, and I'm pretty proud of 21-year-old Ellen, to tell you
good.
the truth. But it does sometimes it bugs the shit out of me because I gave all those years to that. And for lack of a better term, it was a mind fuck.
Yeah,
It was. And you have to, and that's some of the work that people in these situations do, right? When they come out of situations like that, um, you got to relearn yourself.
yeah.
You got to get back to yourself.
You
You
got
got
to
to
get
you
back to
find
the
yourself
place,
again.
where the path that you were walking. See, and then I struggle with this too, because
It's hard. It is hard.
I mean, the concept, and I hear you with I gave all those years and all of that, but, I, the idea of, because what I was going to say, that you got to heal and everything and then get back on the path and get back on the direction you were meant to go. But I don't know if I believe that, because
Life's not a
I don't
straight
know if I believe in mistakes like that. I don't know.
line. You know what? I have said this before, I think, to you in relation to this. I value that experience.
Yeah.
I value it. Some people might think that sounds weird, but if I didn't have that, I wouldn't be who I am right now. And I wouldn't be doing what I am right now. And the way that I had to bring myself out of it and disentangle myself from it. I mean, and I'm even talking about, simple things, right? Getting a mortgage by myself, right? Like on my own merit, just me, all the things that you have to do that you don't know, like when they were like, well, if you want them off the house, you have to refinance in your own name, da, da, da. And you're kind of like, well, is that going to happen? And then it happens, and you're like, holy shit, I can do it. Okay, like that might sound juvenile to some people, but like just getting a mortgage. But you do. But when you're in this mindset of like feeling worthless and like you can't do anything,
Mhm.
when you start to be treated, like a normal person, the mortgage company wasn't going to say to me, I will never give you one. You're a piece of shit. We clearly, but why would I think that anybody would ever talk to me like that? You know why? Because I had 25 years of it.
Yep. Yep.
So I was conditioned to think that everybody would treat me that
Yeah.
way.
Yep.
Right? I was conditioned to think that. And, honestly, with how these people are, who, like we talk about narcissists, okay, or narcissistic personality disorder, or whatever, it is drilled into your head, right? I mean, I always point. He lives over there. I have literally had him say to me, nobody likes you.
Yeah,
Nobody. No one will ever love you.
yeah,
You will never be in a healthy relationship. You're not, you're not lovable.
yeah.
You're a horrible person, Ellen. You're evil.
Yep.
You've mental illness. I am saying repeatedly, repeatedly. And like I think I mentioned one time, I said to him when I was married to him, why are you married to me? You don't even like me.
Yeah, that's
Why?
actually one of the most powerful things to say, because then it flips the mirror back on the other person, and then they have to really think about that, because they're like, oh wait, my approach isn't working, because then yeah, that kind of trumps it out. And how
Yeah,
do I,
you just shot my argument, like you're telling me, how awful I am and I'm the worst person in the world. I'm a bad mother and a bad wife and a bad person. Well, you fucking married me,
Mhm,
right? Like you
mhm.
chose me to be like your life partner. Not that we had a partnership because we didn't. Um, well, then I guess you made a big fat mistake, didn't you? You're legally bound to me. I mean,
Yeah.
there's no logic there,
I've
right?
got this
There's
one
no
young
logic.
woman who's currently married to a diagnosable narcissist. Yeah, and he reaches so hard to find flaws in her. He's cheated on her, and has taken accountability for nothing. And when he tries to list off the things that she's done, number one, it's, in their 5 years of marriage, she's gotten a spray tan twice, which she knows he hates because of the smell. She's gotten drunk 3 times, which
Unforgivable.
I know. She's gotten drunk 3 times, which she knows that he hates, alcohol and drinking. And he's got her so convinced that she presents those to me with such great shame that that we do a lot of work just talking about those kinds of things. So when I flip it around and I say, he comes, you know, if you were to say, well, okay, you left me because I got a spray tan and got drunk a couple times, you divorced me. I said, can you hear those words if you told that to somebody else? And she's like, that sounds crazy. I'm like, yeah.
You know what
And
I would have done? If that's all it took, I would have gone and gotten the darkest setting at the spray tan place and picked up a fucking bottle of Tito's and walked in the door. Are we done? Cool. See you later. See,
it's
because
tan, mom.
there's time to party. Because he doesn't have anything else. Because
But
he
he won't leave
knows.
her. He won't. He just tries to do that. He's got nothing because she hasn't done, but he'll take that and yet he's
Oh yeah.
cheated on her and everything. And of course, then blames it on her, whatever.
We're
But
not taking a
the,
look
but
at
the
his
concept
behavior.
being the condition of the brain. And, we need to be gentle with our brains. That's why we say things like, certain people are more impressionable than others. And what we literally mean by that, our brain will learn anything. It's happy to. You can take it to school. You can take it and teach it a recipe. You can teach it how to play an instrument. You can also teach it how to be an asshole. You can also teach it
Uh-huh.
to feel less than. You can teach it how to, manipulate. You can choose what you teach your brain to do. You can also, I think, even more importantly, unchoose. And that's what's the coolest thing about the brain. However, prior to the moment of unchoosing whatever that behavior is, you got to step up and you got to say, I don't choose this anymore because it doesn't work in the world and it doesn't work for me. And that means if you have to say it doesn't work, that means you're wrong. And people don't like to do that. And that's where the kicker is.
Yeah, it is. And if people got comfortable with being wrong, it would be a whole different ballgame.
I had, with Jack the other day, we had a really nice moment. He had a little hiccup at, he's struggling with his pride and ego, and he's a go-getter, man. If he sees something that he can get involved in and he can stick his neck in, but at his job, he's got one job to do. He doesn't need to be the star. He doesn't need, he needs to learn to take direction. And we went and had a good conversation with his employer, which is a wonderful example because it's more, he works there, but it's more of a social skill development kind of environment. And he just did a good job with these people landing this dynamic. And he wasn't playing well with others and being bossy and all that.
Uh-oh.
Getting sticking his nose where he didn't need to be. And this guy, you know, he said, Jack, I need you to do what I say. I
Okay.
need you to do, and I
That's
watched
correct.
and when you don't, and it was a great statement, and when you don't, I can't trust you. I can't depend on you. And I was like, wow. And I was so proud of Jack because that's one of the, you know, and then his boss said, it's good to be wrong. That's how you learn. And so when we were driving home, Jack was real quiet. And he's like, yeah, you have to be wrong to learn, huh? Yep.
Nobody
And
knows
then I just
everything.
let him sit with that. I'm like, if that's all he got from that, you know, you know, 16, you've done the multiple boy and you've got one the same age. That need, especially in young men to be right, you're just beating your head against the wall, you know. So you're
Yeah,
right.
it's
Because if
bad.
you can admit that you're wrong, the door to learning is endless. But you have to believe you don't know everything to get there.
And you know, you also shouldn't be afraid to make mistakes, shouldn't be afraid to admit that you made a mistake. Like, you know, one of my little, where is it? I think I took it off my wall.
Hold on.
But
Yeah.
like
Keep
the
talking.
rules of the Dalai Lama, you know, once you make a
Hmm.
mistake, act immediately to correct it. Um,
Yes.
you know, don't be afraid to say I'm wrong. Don't be afraid to say I don't know. Don't be afraid to say I'm sorry.
Well,
Um,
I'm telling you, the freedom, sorry, I just with my client. So the freedom of saying I don't know, it took me way too long, I think, to really absorb that. There's freedom in that because then you don't have to go looking for solutions. I mean, not in a lazy sense, but to truly just be like, I don't
I don't
know.
know.
I mean, I don't know that.
Yeah, I mean, how could nobody knows everything, you know, like, and especially at the start, you know, when people start a new job and they're all nervous, I'm like, they're not expecting you to know how to do everything the first day. That's what we have onboarding and training and mentoring and
Yeah.
shadowing and all of these terms that we like to use.
Yeah.
Nobody knows everything from the get-go.
Yeah.
And frankly, I don't want to know everything because then
Me
people are going to bug
neither.
me and ask me questions.
I know. But you know what? That definitely comes with age and wisdom. It's just there
I
is,
don't
and
need to
again, that's another sense of freedom where you're just like, I don't know about that. Thank
I don't
God.
really care to know. I don't really care to know. Thank you. I mean,
My supervisor right now, you know, she's virtual and we're always laughing because I do not want her job. And you know, it's herding cats. It is, you know, and she's like, "Come on, Katie, you're gonna want my job when I retire." I'm like, "No."
you do. You
She's
get
like,
to
"Come
an
on,
age
you
where
could do this." And it's like, "Oh, I know I can.
I just don't
I
want
don't want to
to.
know it, and I don't want to know anymore." La la la, because I don't want anybody to go, "Hey, you kind of know how to do this." No, no, no.
I have no ambition. I have no initiative. I'm happy where I'm at. No, seriously. When you get to a certain age where you're like, I don't want to take on more, right? I have
Well, and
everything.
that's what happens ideally when you get older because you don't need the level of external validate. External validation is necessary when you're younger to get your butt moving. You need
Right.
to do that. But ideally, as you're older and you have developed a sense of self and value and you know what you're capable of, you're like, oh, I don't need everybody. You know, I don't
I
need
don't
that.
care if people like me, don't
Yeah.
like me.
You
Like,
know, we get driven, our drive is for other things now. So, you know, self-fulfillment, learning, sharing, you know, we're at a
living
different.
authentically, being your authentic self,
Mhm.
you know, radical self-acceptance of who you are, liking yourself. And, you know, just like you're not going to know everything, it's just not possible. It's also not possible for everybody to like you.
Yeah. I don't know. Everybody likes me, so I don't know what's wrong with you, but
A lot of people don't like me.
but you know what's really funny is when I was performing and then I gotta go. I've got a client
Okay,
waiting. But um uh so when I was performing a lot, my dear friend well, Leah, who was on the show, our first guest.
Yeah,
So Leah, we were playing out, and I was pretty big at the time in a small pond. And it was when social media was just starting, and and I was on and played live in an awards show, and I won an award. And sometimes I wore weird outfits. I had a big Cookie Monster looking coat, I think, and then and I had dreadlocks and stuff, whatever, but so somebody had just written some really mean stuff.
yeah.
Who was that chick? That was that Katie Miller chick, Can she ever just wear a normal? I don't even remember what it was, but it was hurtful, And and I was at that age where that stuff, and Leah's older than me, and she read it and she was just laughing. She thought it was the best thing ever. I'm like, I'm humiliated. She goes, "Oh my God, any press is good press. That's awesome. Who cares what they think about you? They're talking about you,
And now they're gonna come see what you're wearing at your next show
Yeah.
because they're curious.
So I
And then
think that's a wonderful progression of two different, age groups where you go from I think it's what I'm trying to say is you go from that need from approval externally to attention externally, which who cares what it is? It's just fun.
right.
And then as you get older, it just keeps changing. You don't need the attention. It becomes more of, audiences are nice, but whether you're looking at me or not, I mean, but that comes with development and yeah, all those places that we're at and we get to this stage. I like this stage pretty well. I don't give I care about what people think because I care about people, but not because my personality depends on it.
Right. Yeah, this is a good place to be.
Yeah.
Everyone should be born at 50
No,
because
that's another tough. Nope. Nope. Because then
no,
what they become at this age sometimes is the reverse.
shit, yeah, well, that's absolutely
Yeah.
true. Yeah, no doubt. Well, this was a good one. I like this one.
It's a good one. And we can actually talk more about neuroscience in the future if we want. I'll pull up some pictures of what a
Alright.
brain looks like that's actively has a personality disorder. We can show some pictures of that. It's super cool. And not for nothing, Helen, the brain on fire looks a lot like space. Just saying.
Ooh.
There's a
Maybe,
neat thing where you take some images, brain imagery, and you
uh-huh.
compare it to certain nebulas in space. And
Maybe, see, we don't know what we don't know.
we're just aliens. That's all.
According to that report that came out, they're everywhere, man. So yeah, we could be aliens, not even know it.
All right.
All right. Well, thank you and have a
Fred.
great rest of your day. It's
You
Friday.
too.
And
Keep your
talk
hat
soon.
on.
Go Amherst. Go Amherst
There
Tigers.
you go.
All right. See ya.
Bye.